I'm living in that 21st century, doing something mean to it. Do it better than anybody you ever seen. Do it. Screams from the haters, got a nice ring to it.
Well, thanks, Joe. Thanks for Joe for being here. So, in continuing the conversations that we've been having around platforms, Bleacher Report has completely embraced platforms, everything from social to apps and everything in between. But you guys are also making serious investments behind chasing platforms. So I'd love for you to start talking about how you guys approach what you guys are doing across all these different platforms that you're on.
Well, perfect, Sahil. Well, welcome everyone. Full disclosure, first time I've had to follow a What's Under My Seat segment, so that's a different experience for me. But at Bleacher Report, whereas we might have thought of the various platforms as distribution platforms previously, whether it's Facebook, Snapchat, Vine, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, our own app, BleacherReport.com. Now we're starting to look at them as separate magazines with a dedicated managing editor, a dedicated programmer who works in concert. And as opposed to thinking about creating a piece of content first, and then when we get to the finish line, thinking about how we're programming it on these various platforms, we're thinking at the outset what fits in each platform. And our programmer and our managing editor are working in concert to have conversations before we go out in the field, before we send Howard Beck to be talking to LeBron James. What's our Snapchat experience going to feel like? What's our Instagram? How are we promoting it? Sometimes it's promotional, sometimes it's a piece of content that stands all alone that's just reflective of the celebrity, the athlete, the narrative, and it doesn't necessarily drive audience back to BleacherReport.com.
Well, in the news recently, there was an entire series of articles about how much Turner is investing in you guys in doing this. Could you talk a little bit about sort of just how much you guys are actually dedicating to this over the next year?
Probably the biggest priority at Bleacher Report over the next year will be what we call social moments. It's owning via social when real-time sporting events occur that matter. The Warriors going for 73 wins, Kobe's retirement. Traditionally, it was just you get highlights, you show them, it's a curated experience, but it's essentially an arms race. You go to any number of 5 sites, you see the same thing, the same treatment, a few words underneath, that's about it. So we're investing in a 35 to 40 person editorial team, for lack of a better phrase, focused exclusively on social moments. These consist of editors recognizing moments, planning for moments, motion graphics, animation, social standalone still images, memes, graphics, GIFs, whatever it may be. We're de-emphasizing the amount of articles we create that use basic text and focused more on how are people consuming through this device. On an NFL Sunday, we can see up to 90% of our audience consuming through a mobile device, and we're thinking about that audience and how they consume content visually.
Financially, how much does that cost?
Financially, we'll probably invest between $5 and $10 million this year on growing this initiative out.
Makes sense. The other aspect of it, and the reason I asked that question is, everyone understands sort of the value in all of these platforms, right? But there's also been this conversation about how are we going to actually make money off of all of the content that we're putting on a Facebook, on an Instagram, on Vine, YouTube, wherever. How do you guys look at that in terms of turning this into a business that also brings money back?
I think we're looking at it 2 different ways. One, you always want to go where the eyeballs are. I mean, whether that was print to digital, desktop to mobile, primary home sites to social. The dollars always tend to follow the eyeballs, but it tends to move a little slower. So we want to be well positioned where the eyeballs are when the revenue opportunities really start to pop. You saw Facebook announce policies on branded content last week. Still trying to figure out how those rules work, but also thinking about that almost as a mutual fund, diversified portfolio. Certain amount of content on social we're going to create for engagement. That might be taking a pop culture moment, a movie, a rap video, whatever, putting stop motion heads of athletes on them, whether it's the Damn Daniel and using Dame Lillard when he has a great, and it's Damn Dame, things like that to capitalize on moments. We can't monetize that. We don't own that. But that's important for engagement and audience and growth and amplification. There's a certain amount of content we want to create that's original. We own it. Game of Zones is something we produce, which is a video series that's a parody of Game of Thrones and the NBA. It's our own creation. There's a certain amount we need to create for monetization. There's a certain amount we need to create for engagement. And then there's a middle area, and we need to figure out what the percentage is of each to build out that diversified portfolio that makes sense for business and to keep that 14 to 34-year-old demographic engaged.
Now, does that change depending on the platform? For instance, something that you own like TeamStream versus an Instagram or a Facebook, does that change at all?
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, you want to create the most robust experience on our own app. That's our own and operated. 12 million people have downloaded TeamStream. You'll notice if you watch March Madness or Thursday Night NBA, it never says, come to Bleacher Report and read this article. Come do this. It says the call to action is download TeamStream. That's the only messaging we send because we need you into our experience. And much like Ryan said, where he has a controlled environment and he has those people's names, he gets it in a different way where they directly text him. We get them to download our app, and we've had 12 million people download it, and we feel like once we get you into that experience, then we can optimize that, we can keep you there, and then we can monetize it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Another aspect that we've been talking about is sort of how it's more and more important to actually create content that makes sense for whatever screen, whatever platform that the viewer is on. Could you talk a little bit about how, in terms of what Bleacher Report does, sports content, how that applies to what you're doing on Instagram versus on your app versus on Facebook?
It's very much an evolving conversation because of the fact, if you were to use a sports analogy like a 5-tool player, we try to create pieces of content that are 5-tool pieces of content. They can play on every platform, whether it's repurposing, whether it's the type of content experience works and it's just customized, or you can figure out how many platforms it works on, which ones it works, what type of content do we do strictly on Snapchat that doesn't have application on others. I mean, what we've gotten to the point is, much like a magazine, we've developed mission statements for every one of the platforms, and we have buzzwords, and when someone joins the company, we give them our style guide and our mission statement for each platform. On Snapchat, the buzzwords are experiment. On Instagram, it's visual and uniqueness. On Twitter, it's information-based, snark, real-time, news. So I mean, we build out different customized experience and mission statements and then create content against those.
Have you seen, in the sense of, you guys also sit in this wonderful position where you have the rights to some really amazing content, right? The NBA, for example. In terms of approaching these platforms the way you do and creating original stuff as well as sort of having these rights, how has that performed in the sense of getting engagement from fans on your original content versus just a really amazing dunk that they like it?
I mean, you're never going to top the real content. I mean, the way we look at it is we look at tiers of kind of waves of news application. A tier 1, a real time, a highlight occurs. We just need to get that up as quickly as possible to capitalize on the window. Then if it's a great enough action, we'll then create our own customized version. Weather effects, whether it's, LeBron dunks, we might have an earthquake underneath the court under him when he lands. And can we get that? Can we create enough of those templates and get that content out in wave 2, which might be 2 hours? Now, if it's something that will sit in the landscape for, we'll say the window is under 48 hours, if Steph makes a shot from 40 feet away to beat the Thunder that people will talk about, we know we've got a little bit more bandwidth, that's not going to go away. And we'll create content that'll last in the topical landscape a little longer. So we really look in terms of windows of opportunity. How long do we have? We have to assess the moment. We have to figure out what we do right now to capitalize, what kind of bandwidth do we have to customize and put our own spin on it for the next morning window, 2 to 8 hours, and then is it a big enough moment that we can create something, or is it predictive that we can look forward to Kobe's retirement, Warriors crack 73. I mean, there's only so many outcomes in the sports landscape. The Warriors tomorrow night are either going to set a record or they're not going to set a record. We know that. We're predictively creating content against it for both scenarios, so that in real time, we'll just either hit A or B so that we can capitalize on that window, and we'll have some breakage as we go. But the most important thing is to be right in that moment, real time, but we'll also have a real-time team reacting to the moments that are organic that come up that weren't expected.
Makes sense. We still have a few minutes left. I want to make sure if anyone had any questions for Joe, they're able to ask. So any questions from the audience? Neil, right there. You got the mic. Yeah.
Hi, Neil from the Weather Channel. It's all super interesting, actually, how you do your business. So do you actually have different editorial teams that sit in different time bands? Do you have like the real-time folks, the 2-hour folks, the next day folks?
It's all under the same umbrella organization, but they have different responsibilities. You know, during the day, there will be an engaged team that's monitoring real time for news moments that occur, and there will be separate teams that will be working on our full NBA playoff plan, developing 10 different templates for when a great highlight occurs during the playoffs, and working with ICs and third parties. And we might have full-timer ICs who are working in real time, waiting for an opportunity to react to it. And we juggle them and give them a little bit of real-time opportunity, a little bit of forward-looking. They need you live in that real-time environment. It's almost like working on Wall Street. There's only so much bandwidth you have before you burn out in that. So we give them a certain amount of forward-looking projects, denser projects, more challenging projects. So we'll bounce around our teams and juggle them from real-time to predictive, denser content plans.
It's like a new digital manufacturing process for news. It's very interesting.
Yes.
Anyone else? Right there. Mike? Hold on. Tyler right there? Yeah.
Hi, what is your approach to audience development? Just in the sports world, you have the short form content, then you have your live streaming content.
We're trying to diversify it because you can't become so dependent on real-time news. I mean, that's important to us. But one of our other major initiatives when we talked about building out a social moments team, we're also going to be building out a writer's room this year where we're going to, not unlike a Jimmy Fallon or a Jimmy Kimmel, trying to do scripted content. I mean, I think the world we'd like to create in terms of audience development is, you know, we've had opportunities to do TV shows at Bleacher Report. We've always declined those because we feel like it's a little limiting and narrow and the industry's not going in that direction. We're trying to figure out how we can amplify our Bleacher Report app so that eventually, 2 years from now, whatever it may be, you open the Bleacher Report app on your smart TV next to HBO Go or Netflix, and you can either watch Thursday night basketball, you can watch March Madness, you can see our short form social content, you can see some denser scripted content we create. We're trying to build a kind of well-rounded experience that we can get people into, build our audience through the app, and then transfer that app to other platforms and types of content engagement.
I think we have time for one more. Right there.
There's obviously a lot of focus on getting content out. Do you think about archiving? Do you think about storing these moments and recreating them in a few years?
Absolutely. In fact, if we had full disclosure, that's probably one of our biggest failings. You know, we've worked in a very disposable, for lack of a better phrase, content world, and just owning those moments, we move on, and they don't stand and live anywhere. So the goal in trying to build out an app that can play on a smart TV or device, that you can have a full archive for all of our Game of Zones episodes, that you can see things that have been created and chaptered and organized. We haven't done a great job of it. We've chosen to be successful as a business, and to be successful as a business, it's usually capitalizing on the real-time opportunities and the immediate opportunities, and we've kind of put on the back burner how to build a library. And in fact, audience and traffic are going to be tough over the next year or two. They're really, we don't foresee a waterfall like we've seen in the past. You know, we've seen several, I've been in Bleacher Report with 7 years, and we've seen waterfalls from newspaper partnerships to newsletters to our own app to mobile to social. We've always seen it to Google search. We've always had a waterfall of traffic. We don't necessarily see one coming the next 18 months just given the way the industry's changing and going social. So it's really more important about our brand and scaling down the amount of content we create and creating more of a hits division, and then figuring out how we amplify it through archives, storage, and availability.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Joe, that was fantastic. Okay. And we'll have Paul coming up next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.